In many aspects of a construction project, there are oftentimes multiple options of materials and methods for a given application. Understanding the characteristics of each is a key factor in achieving the best value for a project. In the construction of partition walls, you have the option of choosing metal or wood, and because partition walls have no load carrying requirements, the use of metal in many situations can prove to provide great value. However, as mentioned earlier, understanding the factors associated with their use is critical in determining the appropriate application. With this in mind, let's look at some of the unique material, methods, and tools associated with light gauge steel walls. Unlike dimensional lumber, light gauge metal requires two different parts to assemble the elements of a wall. The track is used for the top and bottom plate of the wall, which will receive the stud. Once in place, they are fastened together with self-tapping screws. Now, the track is designed in a U-shape so the stud can be fit inside the flange of the track, making the joint more secure. Comparing this to that of dimensional lumber, we can see there is a big difference in the method in which these joints are constructed. Understanding this is critical to successful measurement and installation of the wall system. As mentioned earlier, the joints are fastened with screws rather than nails. Because the material is metal, the screws are designed to be self-tapping in order to eliminate the need for pre-drilling holes for the screw attachment. This makes the assembly process much more efficient. Additionally, on non-load-bearing metal walls, the studs are typically screwed on one side of the track only. Now, I know this may seem like the studs would not be securely in place. However, because the studs are carrying no load, they only need to be held in place enough to maintain standard spacing to make them ready for attachment of the drywall. As you might imagine, these different material types not only require a unique set of knowledge and skills, but also tools. The nature of their makeup can require the use of all these different types of tools depending on the material thickness and installation type. With a better understanding of its characteristics, let's evaluate the use of metal studs in the construction of partition walls, both in a house and an office build-out application, and see if it does in fact produce better value. Now, remembering that partition walls have no load carrying requirements, and keeping in mind the characteristics of light gauge metal framing, your immediate thought might be, well, this is a clear, cut and dried answer. Light gauge metal framing makes the most sense for this application. But let's evaluate this a little bit more. We'll start with the home. Typically, the structural elements of a home are built using dimensional lumber, and oftentimes the same size material can be used for both the load-bearing and non-load-bearing walls. In addition, it's common that residential floor systems require intermediate support because they can't span distances exceeding much beyond 12 feet. So now, not only do we have perimeter load-bearing walls, we also have interior load-bearing walls. And now you can start to get this image. If we use light gauge metal for the partition walls, we've got an intermixing of dimensional lumber load-bearing walls and light gauge steel partition walls. Effectively, what we've done is increase the complexity of the project by adding a second material that's going to require more coordination up front, and most likely an added installation contractor, because oftentimes carpenters that focus on residential construction have a very good knowledge and skill set for wood construction, but lack the knowledge, skill set, and tools for light gauge metal framing. Now, from the perspective of value, using light gauge metal for the partition walls in this house doesn't seem like the best proposition. But what about the office building? Let's take a look at that. With most commercial buildings, the structure is typically made up of a concrete or steel framework. This framework creates what's referred to as the shell, which is tasked with supporting all the load elements of the building. Unlike the house scenario, because these are completely different materials from that of light gauge metal and wood, the degree of coordination effort would not change for the construction of the partition walls, regardless of the material type that's used. Now the evaluation can simply be based on efficiency of material. While the material cost of metal studs would be a bit higher than that of wood, the labor efficiency that can be achieved with metal far exceeds the minimal added material investment. So in this application, reducing the labor burden both from a coordination and installation perspective produces a better value by using metal studs. So you can start to see there's not always a clear cut and dried answer, and by simply changing one factor, the outcome can be altered. The key here is to understand the elements associated with a given process, and now you hopefully have a better understanding of those that are associated with light gauge metal framing.